we're really seeing the role of partnerships in delivering climate solutions, and that's across sports organisations. So we work with Liverpool Football Club, for example, and they set a really ambitious target to ensure that all partners were contributing towards sustainability in a meaningful way.
The outcome of a collaboration with their equipment supplier is a ball that's made out of recycled plastic. That's the game changer, literally. And what a wonderful demonstrable way of showing that something can be done differently.
Welcome to the Society for the Environment EnvCast, where we feature special guests highlighting an environment top 5 each month. Each month, we welcome 2 environmental professionals to explore what they believe to be the top 5 things to consider within a particular topic. Topics range from climate to leadership, agriculture to AI, and everything in between. Look out for some curveballs in the top 5 each month, and remember, we can't cover every important thing within a topic. Our aim is to uncover how you can be part of the solution, to learn from the experts, and to sometimes think outside of the box as we strive for a sustainable future. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to EnvCast for another Environment Top 5. This time looking into the topic of sport, and what a topic it is. As is quite often the case, we're joined by 2 registered environmental professionals to discuss the top 5 you should know about the topic, and this time around sport and the environment, and some key takeaways to consider with the idea of generating more positive results in your work within a sporting context and way beyond that as well. But first, I'm Phil from the Society for the Environment and your podcast host for today. Our guest biographies are in the podcast description, but as an extremely short introduction, I'm very pleased to be joined by Ben Barrett, independent consultant specialising in sport and the media. Ben is registered as a registered environmental practitioner, or REnvP, through membership of the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals, or ISEP for short. And Ellen Salter, Sustainability Director at Think Beyond. Ellen is a Chartered Environmentalist, or CEnv, also registered via membership of ISEP. Now, Ben and Ellen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, a week into the FIFA World Cup, which is an unplanned, timely connection to the topic of discussion today, which in itself has been well documented to have its environmental challenges, so we say. But where do we even start when we come to thinking about sport and the environment? That's what went through my mind initially. Sport, as we all know, is massive. I would guess that billions of people interact with sport in some way at some point during their lives. Casual participants, PE at sport, grassroots, elite level. And that's just playing and participating, right? Then there's the facilities, the equipment, the travel, the finances, the politics, the global events, the media, and so much more. But we're going to delve into some key snippets of challenges and opportunities to really get our brains ticking. And we can never cover all of it, but this is a bit of a taster to start things off. So the top 5, we're going to start with number 1, surprisingly. And we're going to talk about the power of sport. And I'm handing over to Ben to kick us off. But first, could you give us a few seconds of a bit more of an introduction to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Bill. Lovely to be here. My name is Ben. I work as a consultant supporting global sports and media organizations, particularly around strategy design, action plan implementation, and also impact measurement, reporting, that type of thing. So I'm very fortunate to work with a really diverse group of clients, the European Broadcasting Union, International Olympic Committee, World Rugby, and also some winter sports as well. So it keeps a lot of different perspectives coming across my desk. Well, look, sport has kind of a unique role, and it's also a responsibility to not just address its own impacts, but also to utilize its cultural influence as well. Sports fans are not the same as consumers or clients or customers. They really represent society at large. And so therefore, sport is a platform for inspiration. I mean, sport kind of cuts through everything. I can't think of any other sectors, apart from maybe the media, that are being heavily leaned on to be cheerleaders for the ecological transition. But basically, the transformations that are already taking place that will take place across venue management, event organization, sports governance, and elsewhere across the industry are a perfect way to demonstrate or show and tell sports fans exactly what is possible. I mean, there's this concept of addressing your impacts and being a platform for societal transformation is really reflected directly in the Sports for Climate Action and also the Sports for Nature frameworks. Athletes are sort of seen as being central to this as well because they are influencers, they are trusted messengers. But this isn't really yet widespread. And one of the really promising things to see, and an example is the International Biathlon Union, is you're starting to see governing bodies actually actively supporting athletes, empowering them to communicate confidently, giving them climate knowledge, building capacity, but also media training and really supporting them to put their heads up above the tow.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. The elite athletes, in particular, they've got a lot of influence, haven't they? In terms of what people are seeing on their social media and things like that. They have huge amount of reach. That's a massive potential for any kind of not just environmental, but any kind of influence that you're looking to spread across their fan base. Is that being used well enough at the moment? Do you think there's a huge amount of opportunity there, right?
Yeah, I think there has been a huge shift in amount of progress, especially in the last six to 8 years. A lot of this has been driven through collective action, through working collaboratively. But when it comes to that kind of message from the athlete, there is still that reticence to be a hypocrite. They fly, they train. It's not really their job to be outspoken for the environment. So when we do see that happening, it's really important to celebrate it and recognize it. And I keep thinking about Hector Bellerin, who was just like a one-man like advocacy machine for his social media feeds for so many years was just trying to really activate his followers to think about the planet in a different way.
That's the name that I was thinking of as well. There's a few more out there, aren't there? But
there are a few out there. Yeah.
Did Hector Bellerin? He win the BBC?
He did. That's right. Green Sports Award.
Green Sports Award. I'm glad someone else. Yes. Excellent.
And there's an organization, Eco Athletes, out there that has a huge stable of outspoken athletes across huge diversity of sports, and really different people at different levels of the sporting kind of pyramid as well. Lou and the team there are doing some fantastic work to kind of keep this consistent message coming out at all angles from different sports, different fans, different sectors of society as well. Yeah.
There's that interesting mix between those influences in the sports they do and traveling around the world and all that kind of stuff. And I know I've heard in the past about Formula One, for example, is clearly has its environmental impacts, but the technology that goes into it filters down into normal cars and transport and so on, that it's actually helping the environment in various different ways. So so many different ways of thinking about it, I suppose. Right. So there's a lot of potential in terms of that reach, that communication, that kind of thing. Ellen, we're going to go to top 5, number 2. So we're looking at some insights into partnerships and how that might deliver impact. But first, for a little bit of context, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for inviting me to be on today's podcast. So my name is Ellen Salter and I'm a Sustainability Director at Think Beyond. Think Beyond is a social impact and environmental sustainability consultancy, very similar to Ben, working through and within sport and entertainment to deliver change and to deliver impact, and very much working with organisations globally. So we have offices in New York, Lausanne and London as well. And some of the organisations I'm working with at the moment include the Premier League, the Royal NH and World Athletics. So a real nice diversity of organisations based here in England and also international federations based more globally as well. So one of the things that we're really seeing in sustainability and sport is the fundamental shift away from how sport approaches sustainability and how sport approaches purpose and impact. Traditionally, we've seen sponsorship models that really focus on the role of partnerships for pure sponsorship and a pure commercial transaction. But what we're really seeing is improved partnerships for systems scaled impact and really thinking about revenue not as a cost, but a driver of revenue and impact for organizations. So this doesn't necessarily have to be commercial partnerships, but we're seeing a big step change in strategic partnerships as well, and the role that both of these can play in accelerating knowledge and technology, which I'll bring to life with a few examples. I think partnerships is very key, and it really reflects on the point that Ben just made about sports as a playground for inspiration. Partnerships can really play a key role in storytelling and really bringing to life the value of social and environmental impact in a way that already resonates with people. People are fans of sport, they're really passionate about sport, and partnerships really help to elevate why they follow a team and why they really trust in that sport organisation or body. So yeah, just to bring that to life really in terms of knowledge, Ben's mentioned UN Sports for Climate Action and UN Sports for Nature, which I'm sure we'll come on to lots within this podcast episode, but they've really played a key role as a partnership convener. They've brought together hundreds of sports organisations globally, and they've really set a common framework and understanding for how we address environmental and social issues, and really set common objectives that all sports organisations are working towards. So a prime example is Sports for Climate Action. That's really set a concrete goal that we're all working towards net zero, which means reducing our emissions by 90% from 2019 or later. We know what the goal is. We want to achieve it by 2040, and we really want to do so with placing climate resilience and global solidarity at that heart. So by having hundreds of organisations sign up to that, it really means we can accelerate knowledge, we can share best practice ideas, and we can really accelerate change in that regard as well. So that's a really nice platform for organisations to sign up to, and it really allows for practical solutions to be applied to cutting edge knowledge. From a commercial perspective, we're really seeing drivers forward with impact, social and environmental value in more detail as well. Again, just to bring that to life, we're really seeing the role of partnerships in delivering climate solutions, and that's across sports organisations. So we work with Liverpool Football Club, for example, and they set a really ambitious target to ensure that all partners were contributing towards sustainability in a meaningful way. So one of the things that they've done, which is really great, is partnered with UPS, the logistics brand, to create a solar-powered merchandise centre in the Netherlands and really help to directly lower their low-carbon impact. And that's something that they communicate with storytelling in their annual report and really show the blueprint for others to use and do as well. And then more further afield, we work with NASCAR. They've partnered with ABB since 2024 on electrification partnership, and they're really using the power of the partnerships to push forward electric vehicles. They created the first electric race car with NASCAR in 2024, and they're really investing in infrastructure such as EV charging. So really taking meaningful partnerships and platforms with credibility to derive impact, to showcase that more importantly, and take that to different events. So NASCAR showcased that at New York Climate Week, and that really scales up the change as well. And then just trying to emphasize that point, partnerships really need to focus on credibility and due diligence and make sure that they're delivering things with real impact, which I know Ben wanted to talk about and come on to as well.
So much to unpack there, and we'll definitely come to Ben. I like the idea. Just went through my mind that Liverpool were working with UPS for the merchandise. Where was it set up?
That's based in the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands. It just went through my mind that they were setting up a UPS merchandise centre. I would have liked that. But I guess they're selling Liverpool kits as well.
Yeah.
So many different types of partnerships, I guess. You mentioned commercial there. You mentioned the fact that UN Sports for Nature and Sports for Climate Action, they're bringing together hundreds of organisations together to talk about that. So there's the convening of those partnerships to work together and share good practice and work under one was it standards or I can't remember what terminology you use now, but that's going to make quite the impact across sports that can work quite siloed, I assume.
Yeah, agreed. And I think so with Sports for Climate Action, for example, there's an annual meeting, all sports organisations come together, data shared on a live portal, and it really allows sports organisations to learn from one another, to join forces in terms of typologies. So whether it's an outdoor sport, a snow sport, more of a traditional football, grass-based sport. And I think a really nice lesson learned from that is bringing together global perspectives. So you'll see sports organisations join from Western Europe to Sub-Saharan Africa. And it's really helpful just to pull together those global challenges, which are all directly reported back to the UN and feeding back those lessons learned. So it's a really great way to share knowledge and to share experiences as well.
That's great. I wonder how many chartered environmentalists and RFPs and RFTechs are involved. Might have to challenge somebody to find out. I'm going to hand over to Ben because I know you wanted to say something about partnerships. Over to you.
Absolutely. Well, we've just heard Alan's some great descriptions of strategic, impactful partnerships, but I did want to kind of look at things from a more challenging perspective, and I think we need to acknowledge the paradox of sports sponsorship. From an ethical perspective, I personally, as a registered environmentalist, struggle to see how it can be justified for sports to accept funding from and provide exposure to the very industries that are contributing to the current and future impacts threatening the planet, its people, and sport itself. This is something, at the same time, I recognize that there's not like a huge queue of ethical, sustainable businesses looking to fill that gap from their money. But the question I've got is, what's the strategy there? What is the strategy of taking this kind of money? That tension between public statements or commitments towards frameworks such as Sports for Climate Action or global climate goals, and then suddenly it's kind of grating to hear these being described as pragmatic and, part of a transition. I remain unconvinced. While the financial realities are clear, I think the problem is normalizing such arrangements risks undermining the legitimate sustainability ambitions of the rest of sport. And we do see, or I have heard personally that, it's okay because they're doing it. Therefore, we should be able to do it. And it is, if you think about that ecological transition, I think it also needs to transition away from that source of funding and replace that with other solutions.
Well, it's certainly worth thinking about the challenges around that kind of thing. There's a lot of money involved in sport, as we well know, and money does drive things sometimes, doesn't it? But there are different ways of doing it, and it's interesting in the context. Obviously, things like climate change and so on that impacts sports generally. Yes, you could play some of them in a nice air conditioning warehouse or whatever. That's not ideal sometimes either. But when you think of sports that are directly impacted, like snow sports, by the weather, which current projections are might make it tricky for snow sport in the future. The idea of enhancing that in a negative way by funding models and that kind of thing doesn't sit too well sometimes, does it? When just making those connections, whether you know the ins and outs of what that means, it's still quite difficult to get your head around sometimes, isn't it? But it is useful to look into those contexts. But I guess there must be positive examples out there as well, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can think of some great long-term partnerships that have really brought together organizational sustainability strategies with a corporate partner who also believes in the same transition. It's some great examples out there.
Okay. A lot of food for thought on that one. Right. Number 3 of our top 5 today. So we're going to be diving into the world of nature as sports common ground. And we're going to head back over to Ben for this one.
Sure. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Personally, over the past 6 years, I feel like we used up a lot of engagement capital focusing on climate. And so I think a lot of people, that can be quite abstract. And maybe sports fans have become fatigued of that, or see that as something that politicians need to deal with. I believe that nature is going to be a better approach, and that that kind of reframing everything around nature is a huge opportunity, because every sport will have a different relationship with nature depending on where or how it takes place. I think that's going to really help sort of bring the triple planetary crises into focus through relevance to the people and the places involved. Because nature is visible, it is local, and it is experiential. As you were just saying, like the loss of snow, that's very visual, very experiential, and it's also cultural as well, and not to mention the economic impacts. But look, nature is directly linked to also actions we need to take for adaptation. Nature-based solutions to protect where we play, but also the places where we live. We were talking about the Sports for Nature framework, and since 2022, I've really enjoyed collaborating with a diverse range of sports on different working groups that Sports for Nature have convened. There are now at least 3 different tools that have been developed for sports organizations at any level to understand their dependencies on nature. But I'm also really encouraged to see how this is flowing through to sports thinking in depth about the equipment and the manufacturing processes that are used in sports. So those wider value chain impacts are now being looked at through a nature lens. And then suddenly it's like, oof, okay, it's right there, that waste or that toxicity or that pollution, that thing is not sustainable because it's not going to last very long. Or we're using something in a way which cannot be regenerated in a meaningful way. So look, I think nature is sports common ground.
Yeah, and I suppose we need to make that connection quite clear, I suppose. When people think of nature and environment, some people think about saving the rainforest, that kind of thing, which is good, obviously. But that connection to sport and nature might look a little bit different, but it's so intrinsic to the way it all works, right? We need nature for everything to work. So there's so many different, I guess there must be loads of different ways to support that, whether it's a small the thing that came to mind was you talked about manufacturing equipment. Now there are plenty of people who take up sports for the weekend because they think it's a good idea and they shove the badminton racket in the cupboard and don't use it anymore. Simplistically, second-hand things, equipment, surely that's an easy call out to stop some of that waste for a start, which all comes from manufacturers, which all comes from materials and so on, which can be used for years to come, right? Is that an easy one?
Well, I think we're seeing like a library of things in local communities, but also I'm thinking of bicycle libraries, for example, and certainly having worked in the sport of cycling for quite a long time, it's quite common for clubs to have that locker room and full of those different and this again helps accessibility. This the circulation of no longer needed equipment can make it more accessible for people who maybe can't afford a high-end bike or to sort of afford those the latest technology that will provide marginal gains against your competitor, that type of thing. So I really do see that starting to become a thing, but there's got to be more of a motivation and I think in constructive dialogue with the wider sports industry. And those conversations have been happening, especially around carbon fiber. Various different sports have been working extensively with their partners. And just an example, which I wasn't involved in, but the International Table Tennis Federation, the outcome of a collaboration with their equipment supplier is a ball that's made out of recycled plastic. That's a game changer, literally. And what a wonderful demonstrable way of showing that something can be done differently.
There's been plenty of times I played table tennis and there's a little split in the ball just stops it from being useful. But surely it can be recycled, or you get recycled table tennis balls and so on. So hopefully that starts to make a bit of a difference as that ball gets rolling.
One of the things, sorry, I'd just like to add to that is on the role of food in sport as well. Food is a significant contribution to carbon emissions and potentially to adverse environmental impacts in sport. Lots of global sporting events like Formula One have really, really, I guess, high carbon hospitality that they really procure food from all over the world. And it's really important to think about where that's procured from. From the organisations I work with, the carbon contribution of catering, food, beverage can be up to 10% of the overall sport organisation's carbon footprint. So really thinking about having a sustainable approach to food, local food, seasonal food is really important from a nature perspective as well, and something that sports organisations really need to tackle too.
Yes, at the other end of that, what happens to the food waste as well, and how is that handled? And we don't want to avoid the greenhouse gases that come off food waste and so on. So that's obviously a thing that's been running through rolled out through across the UK, or is it just England? Can't remember now, with food waste bins for households. But clearly for sporting events, big events of any kind, that food waste is a huge challenge, as well as where it's sourced from and so on. So yes, it's a massive part of the entertainment of sport these days, I suppose, is the food and what comes with it. Ben, you mentioned those frameworks through Sports for Nature. Are they easily accessible, or do you need to be part of the group? Or
so the resources available for Sports for Nature are all online. In order to participate in the framework, it requires a commitment from the head of your organization. It's also a commitment to report annually on your progress towards achieving the principles of the framework. So you see this both with Sports for Climate and Sports for Nature. There's 4 principles. So it can be interpreted in different ways, but there are, commonalities, and this is the main thing, is that you're not doing it alone. You're learning from others. It's going to accelerate the impact which you can have and the speed at which you can transform, because you don't have to necessarily learn from your mistakes. You can just copy what somebody else has done and translate it into your own ecosystem.
All right. Another thing that came to mind was we've talked a little bit about visual, so snow and the Winter Olympics, that kind of thing, and focusing on that nature element. I guess there's some like visible kind of symbols of nature that can be used, like green roofs, for example. Can those projects or those visual cues to think about nature, are they widespread in any way across big sport infrastructure? Because you don't see stadiums with green roofs and things like that. I know they're heavy and it can be there's structural challenges. Is there anything like that? And if there isn't, or if there is, do you think those kind of symbols make a difference to get people talking about it more because you can see it?
I think
that's. Oh, sorry, I've got after you, Ellen. Please go ahead.
From my perspective, I think visible symbols really show and act as a flagship icon that sustainability is central and important to the organisation. One of the organisations I work with is Silverstone, and they have a huge array of solar panels on the roof. And when they hold the Grand Prix, that's really central. That's really visible to all visitors, to the F1 teams, to all staff. I think going back to your questions specifically on green roofs are great, living walls are great, and I've seen lots of organisations embed those. There's often a trade-off between the physical loading capacity of a roof. So in an ideal situation, you'd have solar panels, green roofs, but there's only so much holding there can be. So it's often a trade-off with the organisation. But if I take Silverstone, for example, they're at max capacity with their roofs in terms of solar panels. And now what they're looking to do is bring in nature through bird boxes, through beehives, through insect hotels. So really thinking about access to nature at all levels, whether that's ground level, mid-level, like a living wall, or on the roof as well, and trying to think about how nature competes with, but also complements a climate transition and also a nature transition as well.
And did you want to add anything?
No, Ellen nailed it.
Yep.
That was a great example.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's so many simple things in there as well, and it all makes quite the difference. I'd like to see some more solar panels that are covering car parks and things like that, but I don't know how that could be done. I know Disney were going to do it, I think, in Paris, possibly, but next time I'll go and have a look, have a mooch around. Right. Instead of going to look for Elsa, I'll go and look for solar panels. So, topic number, where are we? 4? Yes, we are on 4. I'm losing track. I'm getting far too involved in this. So, climate strategies and something to do with climate justice. Back over to Ellen to tell us a little bit more.
So one of the things that sport have really been focusing on in a concentrated effort, as Ben mentioned, is carbon footprinting and climate strategies. And that over the past few years has been a big focus for sports organisations as a result of signing up to UN Sports for Climate Action. We are seeing a transition away to nature-based solutions, as Ben said, through the arrival of UN Sports for Nature. And what we really want to do, as Ben's alluded to, is really bring sustainability in sports organisations back to people and places that they directly impact. So one of the things that Sport for Climate Action did last year is really sought feedback from all of the member organisations and noted that climate resilience and global solidarity was really key to carbon commitments. So climate strategies are now not only being judged on carbon reduction, but on who benefits and who is left behind, and really seeking to bring in that social element of climate strategies, which is a really positive step forward across the industry. We know that climate change isn't going away. The impacts are felt more acutely, and sport really needs to reflect on that. And as I've said, make sure that nobody's left behind. Annually, sport contributes the equivalent of a European country worth of emissions, which is enormous. It's equivalent to the same annual emissions of Spain or Poland. So it is very substantial. And what we really need sport to do is to really wake up to the polluter pays principle and really focus on the fact that it will have an impact. And therefore, what can we do to promote social inclusion, participation, make sure that isn't exacerbated by climate change, and really ensure that climate doesn't impact community well-being and accessibility. So yeah, one of the things that we're really seeing across sport is the step up towards social inclusion in climate change, which is often referred to as climate justice. So it's making sure that those who are more vulnerable to climate change aren't further exacerbated, and making sure that we understand that climate change doesn't treat people equally or fairly, but we have a role to play in ensuring that there's the right solutions in place that account for differentiated impacts and responsibility. So one of the things that Ben mentioned earlier was the library of things, and Bohemian Football Club have played a really key role at the forefront of climate justice. So in 2023, they developed a climate justice strategy, and they really embedded that as part of their sustainability and community programs. What they did is they created a climate cooperative and really thought about the role of bringing the community together to really promote climate solutions. And that included creating a library of things. So, really thinking about how we can share resources and tools in the community and how we can repair things, whether that's something as simple as bicycles or it's household equipment and technology. They also looked at climate training and programming for young people, so helping young people develop practical green skills and to get into jobs that might cover sustainable transport, retrofitting, and renewable technology, and then really focus on education at all levels of the community, which is really nice. So what we really need to see is sports organisations look at social inclusion within their climate strategies, and to better understand the benefits that their climate strategies are having, how they can scale those up to wider members of the community, and if climate strategies are having adverse impacts for whatever reason, putting the right mechanisms in place to reduce that. So one example might be we're seeing lots of sports organisations transition to renewable technology, to electric vehicles, to solar panels, but they're made in specific countries that will experience the pollution directly from that, will experience critical mineral extraction and mining. So it's really making sure, as Ben said, we look at the supply chain, we look at capacity building and social well-being, and we make sure that we're understanding the benefits and burdens of our climate strategies, which we are really seeing change. But that's really been over the last few years or so.
Yeah, certainly a full picture thing. There's so much stuff to think about there. I don't even know where to start. The emissions being the same as a European country, that's stopped me in my tracks for a good 30 seconds there. I thought,
Yeah.
how do I start to compute that, and the possible implications or opportunities that creates through everything else that we just talked about. That's just emissions, right? As Ben said, got nature, biodiversity, and so on to factor into that as well, which I know are very much interlinked. So many questions, and I haven't written any of them down. Ben, help me out. If you've got any questions, so much. There's a lot to think about there.
And not so much a question, but more of a reflection. I was really fortunate to work a lot with some sports organizations in the Pacific and the Caribbean. And when we look at climate justice, there's so many angles to this. And having experienced collaborating with some really big sports organizations on sports or climate, it's so hard to reduce, to make this transition. My goodness, it's difficult. And then from the Pacific and the Caribbean's perspective, it's a necessity because they're losing the places where sport has traditionally been practiced. But interestingly, working with those smaller island countries, the focus is really on a sustainable development approach, and that is addressing social and economic issues like as a priority, interconnected with climate and nature. There is a preference to kind of think about curriculum in schools. There is safeguarding of sports people. addressing youth crime, inclusion. Those are precursors to bringing in climate and nature. And the real sweet spot is actually combining those actions so that you're not looking at them as different objectives, but with one engagement activity, you could possibly tick 3 or 4 of those kinds of goals. And also with the Caribbean, we had to look at it through a human health lens because, just an example, but the increase in people being struck by thunder in the afternoons as school kids is just going through the roof because climate is changing. So times when people would traditionally play sports are now really dangerous. So that I'm thinking as well that the experiences and the priorities of these countries can also be held up as a mirror to the global north, to those organizations and richer countries to really think about, okay, mitigation, yes, to protect sport everywhere, not just for our own reputational risk or because it looks good in a report, but also to really think about resilience and protecting sport and how it's played in the future. And don't forget, it's not just athletes and people on the pitch. It's everyone around it. You've got the fans, you've got the broadcast, you've got the host broadcasters, you've got the people working concessions, you've got all of that kind of, everyone around there is dependent on a safe space to play.
Right. And then I suppose a similar kind of visual question in terms of the messaging around it. World Cup's happening, as we know. And this happens to various sporting events that are televised, but the weather is having more of an impact. So I guess that climate change element brings the messaging that whether a football match has been postponed or whatever it might be because of torrential rain that's unusual for that time of the year, but it's happening more and more. The thunder and lightning close to the stadium was recently with the England match got delayed by 1 or 2 hours. And that's on a global kind of media scale. But when it comes to climate justice, you've got regions of the world who will have similar kind of issues, or drought or whatever. It just makes it almost impossible for them to participate in sport for a start. So I guess, do those big televised media events help with that messaging? That's to say that it's happening everywhere, not just the things that are on TV. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it really varies depending on the media and the news outlet. And working in media, Ben will likely be able to add to this as well. I think one of the things that I would really like to see international federations, so the likes of World Athletics, who are doing a really good job in the climate resilience space, and they've also focused on climate justice historically as well. But really seeing those global governing bodies look at the differentiated geographical impacts of the sport that they have as a whole, and really repurposing and reallocating their funding with justice in mind. So at the moment, lots of traditional funding mechanisms for sustainability don't necessarily focus on preferential funding or redirected funding for the most extreme impacts. I know there was a paper on it about how football infrastructure globally could redirect or re-emphasize their funding, but I'm seeing a real need to think about the scale of impact that your funding will have, who will most benefit from it, and essentially looking at that differentiated impact of funding to make sure you're having the biggest impact possible. We work with World Athletics and we help them to create something called the Athletics for a Better World Standard. And that really looks at setting a global blueprint of sustainability across event-related organisations. One of the things we looked at this year for the first time was moving away from awarding points for carbon offsetting towards awarding points towards the standard for looking at climate adaptation and resilience, and really widening that framework. So points are now awarded if you invest in capacity building and education, much to what Ben was saying. Points are awarded if you think about green jobs, if you think about strengthening infrastructure. So really changing your models to not just think about a uniform approach, but thinking about how that differentiates geographically will make a big difference and a big impact as well.
Oh my days. I like these frameworks. These are good. Can we have links to all of these in our podcast description? It would be very useful reading. Ben, you initially mentioned education. How do we feel about the new GCSE in natural history?
That's fantastic.
It's got to be good, isn't it?
Yep. I'm chair of my local wildlife group, and and the WhatsApp chat just lit up, and everyone's sort of saying, man, I wish I had that when I was a student, but also balanced with a little bit of cynicism around, I bet it'll take forever to be developed. And I mean, that's, I think, to throw some light towards ICEP and CEnv, is that the benefit is that you can often work at the curve, at the front of where things are moving and changing, whereas sometimes a curriculum can take a long time to set. And then, as we know from the speed of transformation and what's going on, things can go out of date really, really quickly. So I think that would be my one reservation is to how can that remain fresh, direct and relevant to the young people who'll be able to access it.
So in the meantime, do you think we can get some ICEP members, CEnv registrants into schools, doing some talks, some workshops, that kind of thing, before the natural history GCSE comes about? Whet the appetite, that kind of thing. Start spreading the word. That's got to be a good thing, surely. How do we make that happen?
It's great to see the practical element of it as well. Actually, it's about getting people into nature as part of that experience, and that's going to be a game changer for a lot of school. People think learning in school, learning on screens now, learning out of books, and actually learning from the environment is going to be really interesting to understand what difference they can make to a whole generation's approach to this topic.
Yeah, and hopefully that kind of thing can bring this kind of education to more people, and bring more people along with the journey, I suppose. Get more people education on all these different topics that we're talking about today, whether it's in the context of sport or not. Doesn't matter sometimes, does it? As long as it starts to get the ball rolling, and if sport can help that, I'm aware it's a big industry in itself, but it can be these can be utilised in all sorts of different contexts, can't they? These different pointers. Right, I could talk about this for hours. Topic number 5. So the final topic, as always, of every episode is to outline kind of the number one takeaway for listeners. So what was it that you both agreed upon as a top thing you want listeners to consider going forwards?
So very serendipitously, it's very much linked to what you were just talking about. Ben and I really believe that capacity building and education in sport to deliver systems change is a really good way to keep driving momentum for sustainability. So just discussing it a bit earlier together, we really think that often, traditionally, capacity building in sport has looked at internal training, whether that's workshops, guidelines, toolkits. But what we're really seeing now is that capacity building can extend much further. You can focus on your workforce and your volunteers, supply chain engagement, and community level delivery as well. One of the things that we're seeing is capacity building in a reciprocal way. So not just the traditional, this is the information that I'm teaching you as a sustainability advisor, but active listening from those participants who are learning from being on the ground and the practical delivery of that as well. So that's a really nice step forward. I think just to bring that to life, at Think Beyond, we do a lot of supply chain engagement where we collect improved supplier data to really drive forwards decarbonisation or reduced environmental impact for organisations. But what we really try to do through that process is to capacity build for the supply chain, to seek feedback from them, and to equip them with the data and knowledge that they're able to take that forwards as well. So yeah, really focusing on education throughout everything you do, whether that's through athlete engagement and educating the masses. For example, a couple of years ago, Beth Mead was really vocal and outspoken on climate adaptation and the role that plays, which is really great to see, because just by her mentioning that, you'll see lots of people interested in football and women's football in particular look into that further, and really just trying to get those flagship organisations and athletes to promote for education as well as internally from sports organisations themselves. I know, Ben, you wanted to add something on this as well.
Absolutely. A common kind of experience over the past few years working with a number of clients is that often people are assuming new responsibilities for their organization's strategies or implementation of sustainability strategies. It's not necessarily starting up a whole new sustainability team. It's really about harnessing the existing knowledge and skills and augmenting that with the foundational knowledge, with that bigger picture understanding of those systems that are crucial, not just to the current situations we face, but also the solutions and the improvements we need. So I'm really keen to shout out there, that through ICEP and through other professional standard organizations like CEnv, it's those training courses which are kind of up to date, which are really relevant, are just the perfect way for people to really formalize what they're having to do as part of their new role. And that's kind of great. I mean, sustainability is everyone's job, but to bolster that with some really, it's not just a one-day workshop. This is proper, like, in-depth, getting right into the detail of the various tools, techniques, and standards that are required. I think that's green jobs. It's people kind of making their jobs a little bit greener.
I feel like there was a bit of capacity building in there and a bit of competency building. I like that. That's quite good. That's quite a nice way to bring things to a close. Anything else you wanted to add to the capacity building element? I like the influencing part. I suppose some of it is influencing the influencer. So, you mentioned Beth Mead, and I'm not saying somebody influenced her to talk about that kind of thing, but in some instances, the nudge in the right direction with the correct practice and that kind of thing starts that conversation and starts that interest. And then those who have that global reach or national reach or regional reach or whatever reach they have can make a difference, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think thinking about in the natural history GCSE that you've mentioned, there's a real role that elite sports organisations can play with their young people in their academies and bringing in climate change and bringing in environmental and social issues as part of their education, as part of their pathway to professional sport. So seeing an increase in that would be great as well.
Okay. I think that probably brings our podcast to a natural close. So thank you very much to our guests today, Ben and Ellen. As always, we have covered a lot, and I really want to delve deeper into some of these topics. It's fair to say that sport is a big passion of mine, and the environment. It kind of brings my two biggest passions together. Given that my degree is in sport management and I work for an environmental organisation, this is good for me. Although it might be bad for my brain as I start thinking about it continuously for the rest of the week, including night times. Anyway, so please check out any links that we have in any resources in the podcast description to keep on learning. I think we're going to have a few links in there today. So if you have an idea for a top 5 topic for us to cover in the future, please do drop us a message to let us know, either in the comments or via the contact form on the CEnv website, or if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. But thank you again, and we'll see you in the next episode next month for another topic to explore. If you've made it this far, please remember to subscribe wherever you're listening to this episode so you don't miss the next one. Also, rate our podcast and leave a comment to help us reach more people. Thank you very much for listening or watching on YouTube. We look forward to the next episode next month. See you then.